Well, a Monday night. What do you think?
I don't know. Have we done a Monday night before?
Oh, I don't know. Well, we
Monday
may
night,
have.
done Saturday. We've probably done Thursday. I don't know.
Yeah,
Monday. So
yeah.
happy Monday to you.
Happy Monday. It's a good Monday. I'm a little tired.
I'm quite tired. Yeah.
Yeah, boy, we had the rock and roll half marathon and 10K yesterday, and we're tired for different reasons. So I think at this point, if anyone needs to make 10 gallons of hot chocolate, you've got a few experts in the club on how to do that at this point.
I was, as I went through that station and got the hot chocolate, I'm like, how are they gonna keep water hot enough long
Yeah,
enough? So
that was
how did y'all keep the water hot enough long enough?
that was Chef Bob taking care of the water. So we
Oh,
had so if people don't know, the Las Vegas Tri Club volunteered to hand out hot chocolate after the finish for the rock and roll race yesterday, which was the 10Kers and the half marathons. And so we had probably about 14, 15 of us, and we had a pretty good system eventually set up. Unfortunately, rock and roll did not provide the right tools or the right enough of something, and we were adapting as we went to try to get hot chocolate out to everybody. So if we did miss you and you wanted hot chocolate, sorry, but we gave a lot of hot chocolate out, and we had a nice process where Bob was responsible for keeping the water warm and hot. We had Scott was mostly filling up all the buckets with water, all the tins to put on the burners. Shauna was helping to manage the water once it was hot to get into the jugs of that we added the hot chocolate to, and then a whole bunch of us, Leanne, myself, Beverly, Chip, we were all ripping packets of hot chocolate and putting them, the contents into a temporary bucket that would then be combined with the other buckets ultimately to get the right concoction for our big 10-gallon jug containers. And then we get the water in, put them up, and then we had our pourers, Amy, Anita, Lisa, Shannon, they were all pouring hot chocolate. We had many little issues that happened along the way. It sounds so easy, but it was fun. We had a good time.
honestly, it looked like everyone was having a good time, and
Yeah.
I personally I loved getting a hot chocolate at the end of the race. It was great. My question is like this is a pro tip. We do pro tips every now and then. Is why don't you get the big canisters of powder rather than the individual packages?
That is a good
That seemed like a
question.
bit inefficient.
Yeah, that was a good question. And we were all asking that. It's like, what are we doing ripping these packets open? We didn't even have scissors. I mean, at
Yeah.
least give us some scissors. So it was that was sort of a surprise. And then the other surprise was the coolers that we were putting the hot chocolate in. Hot chocolate in coolers doesn't necessarily mix because their coolers really need to be built for cold stuff as well as for hot stuff. And these coolers were not built for the hot stuff. And so the valve that was exiting the hot chocolate kept getting stuck. And we eventually just reverted to just having the valve open all the time, which meant we needed to have a coordination of people who are filling cups, just coordinating, switching the cups out and getting them out to people. And so it was really a funny assembly line.
I love this fact that they picked the triathlon club to do the technical side, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's so easy just to give out bananas. I
yeah,
mean,
right,
you
right,
have
right.
problem solvers at the
Yeah,
hot chocolate station, right?
yeah.
Like this is serious problem solving, and I'm really glad that you all
Yeah,
did that.
no, and that was done on purpose. The volunteer director of the race did purposely put us in that spot, knowing that we may need to solve some problems. And that volunteer director is my wife, Laura. And
Exactly.
and so
Like
we
I'll give you the technical one.
that's
Okay.
right, that's right. So it was great and kept us busy, and we had a lot of fun. We were all covered in chocolate at the end of the day, and it was a good time. We saw a lot of athletes. We didn't see all of them, but we saw a number of the athletes, and it looked like everyone has a great time. And you had a great time. You ran it.
I did run. It was I guess my coming out party. I don't know
Yeah,
what you're gonna
yeah.
call it. My first outside run since July, and
Wow.
first run longer than 4K, I think, since July.
That's awesome.
So I did the 10K,
Yeah.
and runners just run. That's what I
Mhm.
do. it's so funny. I really didn't know if I could run. Like
Hmm.
I knew I could run. I just didn't know how it would feel to go like
Yeah.
outdoors. And on my indoor runs, most of them have been on body weight support.
Okay.
On either the lever or the boost or something. I think I've only done maybe 2 or 3 runs that have not been supported
Hmm. Hmm. And
since
short. Yeah.
short.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was really fun, successful. I mean, I had such a good time. Like,
Yeah.
and I love running.
Yeah.
Like, and I just love it.
Hmm.
I like it. Like, I really like cycling, but I forgot how much I really loved running.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like I don't know what it is. It's like man against the road or man against
Uh-huh.
the trail or whatever. Nothing else, just a pair of shoes and you.
Hmm.
Um and I just I don't know. I love big races like that too. Like the big triathlons too. And part of the reason I love it is it's so inclusive. Like anyone that wants to can sign up.
Yep.
You get all shapes and sizes.
Hmm.
And, some people are walking and some people are whatever. Like, people are stopping and taking pictures along the way.
Yep.
And if that's their jam, that's great. And
Yep.
I don't know. I think that that's really a cool thing. And the barrier to entry in running is so low
Yeah.
that really, I mean, pretty much anyone can get in and do that. And I don't know. I just loved it. I love the whole experience yesterday.
Hmm.
Just from like the driving down to the race and the anxiety, because I haven't felt that anxiety in a long time,
Hmm.
um, and the not knowing if I could actually, run the entire way. I
Yeah.
kind of thought there would be a point where my legs would kind of give up on me and I'd have to walk, and I didn't,
Hmm.
and it's kind of fun, and it was actually really cool. Just after I finished, I got a text from a friend, actually a former guest of the show, Graham McGinnis,
Okay.
and he was on one of the bridges,
Mm.
and he texted me. He's like, "Hey, were you running the 10K?" I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, are you out here?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm on the bridge." He's like, "But I could spot you running a mile away."
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
We've ran together many times, and
Yep.
he's like, "You just have such a unique like run gait."
Yep. Hmm.
And I'm like, "Oh, that's so fun!" Like,
Yeah.
I, it was a really good experience, and I just love the fact that we had that premier running event in Las
Hmm.
Vegas.
Hmm.
What was it, 20,000 people about?
Yeah, they had almost 30,000 registered for both the half and the 10K and the 5K as well, which was the night before. There's always a number of people that don't show up. I think crossing the finish line, I didn't get the final numbers, but I think it was over 25,000 between the 10K and the half marathon. So that's great, and what just an event, it's so neat to see. We had some real elite runners there,
Very
which
fun.
was fantastic to see both in the 10K and in the half. Then we had our, middle of the pack, or front of the packers who were right behind the elite folks, and then the middle of the packers, and then the back of the pack, and all different kinds of people, like you said, doing it. And I love seeing the pictures that people are posting along the way at the, Las Vegas welcome sign and the different structures that you see along the way. It's just such a neat experience. And I was really looking forward to being on the strip, handing out the hot chocolate, being right in front of the Bellagio fountain, and I'm waiting for the sun to go down and all the lights come on, and that spectacular view of the strip is that's just sort of fun.
It's so awesome. Well, John, this takes us to what we're going to talk about tonight. And
Yeah.
what we're going to talk about tonight is using individual races, so individual sport races, to help us train for triathlon.
Hmm.
And really thinking about the why, not just because, oh, I want to do a race, but like there can be purpose built into doing these individual races. And I know, John, like you've done running races, you've done
Hmm.
bike races, and you've done swim races that have all been like an individual thing.
Hmm.
When you do those, is there purpose to train for triathlon, or is it to do the races?
It's a mixture of both. I enjoy racing, and put me on a start line of something, and it's fun. Whether it's going to, like you and I have both done, the corporate challenge swim meet, which is the shorter events, or we've done the bike events as well, or 5K. Those are fun. I do also like to incorporate that within the mindset of a triathlete or a multi-sport person. But start line, race, go. Where's that finish line? That's fun to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons to do it, like good reasons,
Hmm.
not just like we like to race. I mean, you can't really get into triathlon for my experiences and not like
Yeah.
enjoy the race. But I think that, like, I'm thinking like from a coaching perspective, and like having my athletes, I want them to do individual races.
Hmm.
And there's many reasons. So if we just break them down kind of maybe one at a time. So let's talk about a running race first, since we just did this. And like, what could an athlete, like a triathlete, gain, for example, from doing the race last night, if they're going to race in St. George or Oceanside or one of these early season races? So what do you think that they could potentially gain?
Well, if I was going to do the Las Vegas rock and roll race and prep for St. George, the rock and roll race is a really pretty flat course. And I think that that type of course allows you to establish sort of a baseline of what your running ability is. You don't have to deal with the strategy of running uphill or the strategy of running downhill or even really turning much, because this is pretty much a straight course with just a few 180 turns. How many, or is there just two 180-degree turns, or is there?
There was a few downtown, I think, in the half
Okay,
marathon.
okay.
I only did two turns, but it was
Yeah.
on.
So, you're really focused on the running on the flat, and that gives you sort of a good baseline of where you are for whichever distance you're doing, whether it's the 5K, 10K, or the half marathon. So I think that's one reason that I would do just a running race, is to sort of get a sense of where I'm at before I add on a swim and a bike before that.
Yeah, I love that. And so for the people that I'm coaching that did that race, one of the things I'm going to look at is their heart rate, because you
Hmm.
can hold a heart rate on a course like that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
it's like in the St. George Ironman or half Ironman, it's up, it's down, it's side camber, it's this, it's that. So I can get, even in a 2 hour race for somebody, we can get pretty dang close to what their threshold heart rate is,
Hmm.
what they can hold for that amount of time.
Hmm.
And your legs might not be able to withstand that pace, but we can start to look at your heart rate and say, if you're at 170 beats a minute for 2 hours, well, I know then pretty much you could probably go 165 to 170, somewhere in that range in a half Ironman on your run,
Yeah.
and hold that. So once again, you're learning something about yourself and your physiology, because
Hmm.
between now and St. George, maybe you become a fitter athlete. Hopefully you will, right? You got like, I
Hmm.
don't think we have 8 weeks or 9 weeks. Um, Hopefully you become a fitter athlete, but your threshold heart rate shouldn't change,
Hmm.
right? So when you're going up and down and on a side camber or whatever, and you're looking at your watch and you're looking at your heart rate, and you're like, yeah, okay, I've done 170 beats a minute for 2 hours. Like, this is no problem for me to to continue at this
Yeah.
heart rate, and not even really worrying about the pace. Like at St. George, the pace is really hard
Hmm.
because there's really no flat, so you can't really go off of a running pace on that race. And even Oceanside, I mean that's one's coming up as well. I have a really hard time at Oceanside because we're at sea level,
Hmm.
and then trying to factor that in. Well, what does this mean for my pacing and my heart rate? And
Hmm.
there's things you can gain, both from like the metric side, but also internally, right? Like the
Hmm.
feeling of being at threshold or just below threshold for an extended period of time, which many people in the off season haven't felt. Right? It's really hard in the off season of triathlon to like go 2 hours at threshold.
Yeah, especially in a training session. And this is one of the values of doing individual sport races. You have the opportunity, even course wise, to run a sustained distance and time, versus if we're training. Not all of us have access to a course that we can run without having to cross the street and stop at a stoplight or whatever it ends up being. And so having that ability to run a course allows that. And just that mindset of being in a race and getting this sensation of what the pace feels like at the heart rate that you're talking about. That's just so important, just to establish that mindset that you're going to use for a triathlon.
Yeah. And I think you can also you actually get another thing here where you get some stimulus that you probably wouldn't get,
Hmm.
right? Like a physiologic stimulus. There's actually a training impact of
Yeah.
that run. Because once again, like, you're probably not going to do 2 hours, if that's what your time, or an hour and a half or
Yeah.
whatever, at that threshold.
Hmm.
And same and the pounding even on your legs, right? Like it's really hard. Like as a coach, I guarantee you, I never put into somebody's workout, go 1.5 hours as hard
Right.
as you
Hmm.
can. Right? We just don't do that because
No, right.
people, they'll hate it. But if I put it into a race and say, hey, like, go ahead and sign up for a half marathon. Oh, okay, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
And you almost trick them into it, right? Or you trick
Yeah.
yourself into
Hmm.
it. Like, John, like, honestly, if I told you right now, hey, like next weekend you're gonna do a training run of an hour and a half at threshold, you'd be like,
That's
no, I'm not.
tough.
It's really tough.
It is. Well, so how about let me flip it back on you in terms of towing the start line and the anxiety that you feel on a race day versus a triathlon versus waking up and having to do a training session that may be challenging. How do you approach that, or what do you work with on that end?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? So there's different anxieties for both. Like there's some people that have anxiety, and I've talked to them about when they have a hard session coming up,
Hmm.
right? They'll look at, I don't know, let's say a 2x20 on the bike that they have to do tomorrow. And like they're seeing it on their, and they tell me like, I didn't sleep good the night before because I was worried
Yeah,
about
yeah.
2x20. So there is anxiety that can be built into training. And I know there's some coaches out there that actually don't publish their athletes workout to the day before, or the sorry,
Mm,
the morning of.
mm,
So they get, because they know their athlete has anxiety if they do. And
yeah.
so there's a way, like on Training Peaks, you can actually set it so every morning it gives them
Mm,
the
okay.
4 o'clock in the morning, whatever it comes in, so they don't see it coming.
Uh,
And
that
that's it.
would stress me out.
But it stresses people out the other way because then they don't know and they're
Yeah,
wondering, oh my gosh,
yeah.
last Tuesday was a hard run. Sunday
Hmm.
night, I bet my coach is going to make me do a hard run again. Oh, like so there's, but once again,
Hmm.
that's an individual thing with an individual athlete that you'd
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
find those things out.
Mm,
But going back to the question of like race day anxiety, it's something really hard to mimic,
hmm.
right? And I do know that, for example, like the athletes I'm working with for Oceanside, it's a real thing, especially with that swim.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of anxiety in there. If you can train somebody to race more and get themselves into that anxiety, hopefully they learn that
Hmm.
how to kind of keep it calm.
Right.
It's like, like yesterday, try and keep it calm, but still be excited, but like don't worry about it.
Hmm.
If you do that enough, I think that really does help. And we've talked a little bit about this before, that I do the Zwift Racing League, and it is stressful. Like I'm on a team, we're on Discord talking, they talk trash,
Hmm.
and there's a start time, and it's at like the
Yeah.
clock is ticking down, and my like I'm just sitting there on my bike, and I'm seeing my heart rate go up, and I'm not even pedaling.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to like actually I've used that to try and learn like, okay, how can I actually keep my heart rate lower
Yeah.
5 minutes before we start, right? Even though the anxiety, I know it's there, and I know those are my hardest workouts of the week. Those are my
Mm-hmm.
highest heart rates ever are in the Zwift Racing League. And like
Mm.
we have an extremely hard race tomorrow. Might be the
Yeah.
hardest race of the season is tomorrow. And like I'm nervous about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm already nervous. Well, probably because my legs are pretty sore, but I'm nervous. It's a 43K team time trial,
Okay.
and I'm telling you, it is super hard. So, but I also know that I've done so many of these races that I can keep it calm. I'll
Hmm.
fall asleep tonight. You know what I mean? Like it's not like that because I've learned, and if it's every week I have a race, and I noticed this last year when I was racing, I was a lot less stressed at the start line
Yeah. Yeah.
because of that. So I think that's something that doing these individual races can help with that, right? You're just used to that anxiety and you learn how to deal with it.
Hmm. Yeah. How to absorb it and how to make it turn into a positive response instead of a negative response. Because yeah, that race anxiety can really work against people, and I've seen it where some people will walk away from a race before even going to the start line. It is that high of an anxiety, and going and practicing, doing individual sports, I think is a great way to just set that mindset for what it's going to be like on race day for a triathlon or whichever multi-sport event someone's going to do. Because you can learn the different skills that you can use to help manage that anxiety. We all get nervous. We all question, or can we do this? Everybody has that anxiety. It's just a matter of how do you turn that into a positive.
The other thing I did with several of the athletes that raced the half marathon yesterday that I coach is I told them that we're going to practice our nutrition as if it was a
Hmm.
70.3.
Yeah.
Like, can you actually get the calories? Because I know you need more calories in the run of the 70.3 because you're still trying to make up from
Right.
other work, but can you actually do it? You know, and even though I know they didn't need that amount of calories, I'm like, let's practice it while you're
Hmm.
at threshold. Practice getting the water, practice drinking, getting a water cup. And those are all things that, once again, you don't get to do if you don't do practice races.
Right.
And then, like, for me, one of the other things that I do, even with the Zwift racing, is I'm always trying to get my blood sugar exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I've had issues with blood sugar regulation before, and even yesterday, I'm like, okay, like, it's 10 minutes before I'm gonna have a gel, and it was probably like in the first mile, like, oh man, maybe I ate a little too much because I had
Yeah.
banana about an hour before, but that went away really quickly, and I actually felt really good energy. Like,
Hmm.
okay, like, write that down. Like, that was a good thing for me. Like, to
Yeah.
have that banana an hour before, and then have that gel 10 minutes before. Because I've experimented with gels like 2 minutes before, 5 minutes before. Like, I'm always
Hmm.
kind of tinkering a little bit, and I think that that's something else you can do in an individual race.
How about testing out gear and nutrition is a great example. How about even gear, like for running, testing out shoes or something in biking? That how do you go about that?
No, I think it's an interesting one. I don't think you need to run in your triathlon suit, for example, like
Hmm.
in an individual race. 'Cause I don't think there's any really advantage or disadvantage to that. But definitely shoes.
Hmm.
Right? I almost wanted to, like, say, hey, and what I want you halfway is pour water all over your shoes so your feet are completely
Yeah.
wet. They get in
Right.
a
Right.
triathlon, but I
Hmm.
wouldn't. I wasn't going to do that to people.
Hmm.
But like, I put my race shoes on yesterday that I plan to do triathlons, and
Yeah.
I think that's important. I actually even contemplated going no socks,
Hmm.
and just like the feeling of going no socks, because in a 10K I would go no socks,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I didn't. But I think you mean you could. I think more in, like, the bike, I would say good chance. And we've talked about this before with, we used to do some time trials, and I think it's so good to test out all the aero equipment at high
Hmm.
speed, right? Like, get your aero helmet, get your disc wheel, get your tire pressure exactly how you want, get everything exactly dialed in, like it's a race. Like, whatever you're gonna do, your aero socks or sleeves
Hmm.
or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of people on the bike, they just save that for the race,
Yeah.
and
Right.
or they'll go practice in it, like, but it'll be like the week of the race, like on a Tuesday, it'll be like a little test of their equipment, but it's not at race speed
Hmm. Hmm.
or race power. So I think that on the bike, that's probably pretty important. Uh,
Hmm.
and then, speaking of, like, swimming, um, you know, we I know people that go down and swim the lake all the time. And in the summer, they don't wear their triathlon, like what they'd wear in a triathlon. They wear their swimsuit. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you wear your swim skin if you're going to normally
Hmm.
practice in that, or if you're just going to swim in a triathlon suit, swim in that. I think that's a good kind of tip as well,
Hmm. Hmm.
is to try and do that.
Yeah, no, I love it. And sometimes you can actually rule out that some gear doesn't make a difference if tried different things and you get used to it. And sometimes that comfort is probably or can be important. How about transferring race tactics from a 10K race like you did to a race? I know you talked about just racing in general, but how about specific tactics that you might use or might sharpen?
I think pacing for sure,
Mm-hmm.
as a tactic, right? So yesterday's course, I know, there's many people that are listening to this that don't know it, but there's a slight uphill for the first 2 miles, and then you
Hmm.
turn, and it's a downhill for the next. If you're doing the half, it's a downhill for the next 6 miles.
Yeah.
Well, there's a pacing difference there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
understanding that. So, for example, for me, I went 7:35 on the first 2 miles
Yeah.
from. and then when I turned, I was down to 7:10. And it's in 1% difference up versus down is that amount.
Mm-hmm.
In a triathlon, we often don't, I see people get caught in this, like, oh, I'm just in this pace,
Yeah.
right? And not understanding that. And even like working with a triathlon coach, I've seen people do this, and I've probably done this. Hey, I want you to run this pace, not understanding that a
Yeah.
1 degree up will maybe be 20 seconds a mile
Yeah.
slower.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so learning that, and learning that your body um, can I don't know, basically go slower or faster depending on the grade, even when it's subtle. I think we all know, hey, you're going to go up a 5% incline, it's going to be slower.
Right. Right.
But like, for example, Oceanside is a good example. When you get on the back half of the course, there's a lot of 1% and 2%.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And so, I know when I race Oceanside, I know exactly, I've raced that so many times and I've practiced around that course. I know exactly where those are.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely, I absolutely do adjust on those downhills. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go a little faster on these. And on the
Mm-hmm.
uphills, I know I can't hold the same pace, and I'm strategically not holding the pace
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to get a heart rate spike by just holding that pace.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that stuff all planned out before I go. And same thing, like the people I coach, we talk about that stuff.
Mm.
I think that's important, and you can learn that. The other thing I was doing yesterday, there was just the tiniest bit of headwind when we turned.
Mm.
And I'm like, what I'm going to do? I'm just going to see if I can get in behind a big guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Right. And just tuck in behind somebody for a while and just see what it feels like. Because I do
Mm-hmm.
that when I do triathlon. If it's really
Mm-hmm.
windy, I'll tuck in behind somebody on a run.
Yeah. Right.
If you save 1% to 2% energy, and which is what the research says, and depending on how
Mm-hmm.
windy, it might be 3 or 4%, and get used to running pretty close behind somebody and know who you can run close behind.
Mm-hmm.
Right, someone that's kind of holding that consistent pace. That was a good little tactical thing. The other thing that I do when I do runs like this is, we've talked about this before, is this is a really good time to practice your tangents.
To do what?
Practice your tangents.
Oh
So
yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
for those, we talked about this before as well. Like there's a shorter way to run around a course,
Mm-hmm.
and yesterday was a perfect example of it, because the Las Vegas Boulevard is not straight, right? The one end is really straight, but then it curves. And man, I tell you what,
Mm-hmm.
people were running on the wrong side of the road.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, why would you run on the wrong side of the road? Like, people are so ingrained to run on the right-hand side of the road. It's in their
Mm-hmm.
brain, it's in their DNA.
Right.
I assume if you're from Australia, you will run on the other side of the road. So at the finish, the last like half of a mile of either course, either the half marathon or the 10K, if you ran on the left-hand side, it's shorter.
Mm.
But literally everybody in the 10K that was ahead of me that I could see was running on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Interesting.
I probably made 10 seconds just by running on the left-hand side of the curve.
Right. Right.
And it goes back to like on a track. Do you want to run the inside lane or the outside
Mm-hmm.
lane? Like,
Mm-hmm.
run on the inside lane.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was another thing I was really working on yesterday, was on the subtle turns, is like actually running the tangents.
Mm-hmm.
One other last one, since you asked, as far as tactics, is also trying to find the flattest spots of the road.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think that's really important. Is
Mm-hmm.
there's especially in some sections on the right hand side, there's a lot more camber of the road,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would, if it's a straight section, I'm not trying to run on a tangent. I was trying to go more to the left where the road is flatter.
Yeah.
I run faster when I'm flat rather than on a camber.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to do that as well.
I
So
love it.
lots of little tactical things you can work on.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to add, John, is the tactic. It's not really a tactic but it's that this is a practice race,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that often we get in all of these things. I think that these should all, for a triathlete, all of these individual sport things should be practices,
Mm-hmm.
and don't get caught up on the result. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was happy with my time, but it's not a live or die. Like, and there's a saying that the way to screw up an A race is to make your B race an A race.
Oh yeah. There you go.
You know, You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, right.
And people do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guarantee there are people in that race last night that are going to go race in Oceanside
Yeah.
that raced it way too hard because like, well, man, I got to beat my PR. I got to like, and it really was a training race for them.
And they may not have had the fitness to try to
Right.
hit that PR. So it's interesting. I like this path you're going down because this is where I was going to jump in on was this idea of fatigue and managing fatigue. You know, we all know what fatigue is. It's a general tiredness. You get tired, you slow down, what have you. But another way to think about fatigue is it's an ability to predict how much further you can go. I know that's really weird, but it's a very psychological definition of what fatigue is. And sometimes doing these races and focusing in on the tactics, you can explore that fatigue um, window of opportunity, I guess, if you're looking at it that way. There's so many times that we don't push ourselves to the point that we will actually collapse once we hit the finish line. And there is a little bit of art to that and a little bit of science as well. But you know, taking an opportunity to allow yourself the freedom to possibly find that point where you can no longer continue. Sometimes that's what's a great about doing these types of events is, you know, tactically you can say, okay, I'm going to use the last 2 miles of the 10K or last mile of the 10K, and I'm going to try to really push the pace to the point all the way through the finish line. And tactically, you can practice that. And I really believe that actually does help the athlete sort of evolve their thinking in terms of what's possible. And then you apply that to a triathlon where you've gotten off the bike, you're now into the run, but now you have this confidence that you can actually push yourself a lot more than what you are even at that moment, and you let the race sort of come to you at that point, as opposed to feeling down that you're not able to sustain a pace or what have you, but you're able to sort of stretch out the capabilities that you do have.
Oh man, I love this topic. Like I love exactly what you said. So I'm going to give you my kind of thought process on this with fatigue.
Yep.
So have you ever, I mean, I know you have, you've driven to St. George, right?
Yep.
2 hour drive. And you get there and like, oh man, I'm tired. That was a long drive. But you've also driven a lot longer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I used to drive to Canada when I
Okay.
for Vegas, and I would do a
Mm-hmm.
sprint, and I'd have it in my mind, okay, it's a 21-hour drive,
I love this example.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd start to get tired around like 17 hours or
Right.
16 hours
Mm-hmm.
because I just think physiologically kind of that was the
Mm-hmm.
end. But my mind was already
Yep.
set on it's going to be a long drive,
Right.
right? So my experiment, and this is an evidence-based triathlon question for you. My experiment would be with a runner.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they were in the run yesterday and they're at K9 and you said to them, hey, actually, you signed up for the wrong thing. You have to turn and finish the 10K.
Yeah.
Would they, like, what would that pace of the last K be versus
Mm-hmm.
somebody that signed up for the 10K? And or the level of fatigue in their brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing, that race is kind of dirty for the
Yeah.
people in the half marathon because
Yeah.
they see the 10K turn off and they're like,
Yeah.
you're basically done. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
else has got to keep going, right? The half marathoner's got to keep going. So what is it like that happens in your brain when you set up to do a 10K or a 5K versus a half marathon or a marathon?
Yeah. Right.
And how do you have that resilience? And a lot of it is mental, right? Like you've built it up in your head. I'm going to exercise for this long.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do it. Like, John, you've done many Ironmans and you
Mm-hmm.
set up your mind, hey, this is gonna be a long day,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And after, an hour swim and 2 or 3 hours on the bike, you're not the same level of like fatigue as doing, let's say, a sprint race and
Yeah.
or even a half Ironman.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably working almost as hard, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
10% less hard,
Yeah.
but it's in your mind, right? Like I'm going 12 hours today. I'm going to be out
Yeah.
here for 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And you've set yourself up like that. And it's
Yeah.
amazing what we can do when we have this, in our mind.
Oh, you're spot on. And my dissertation actually was a bit on this, but I also want to add in something else. I got to add this in before I forget. Is you can also do this race with the mindset that you're just going to go have fun,
Yes.
and you're not going to push the pace, because sometimes that ability to stretch the way that you can do a race will actually help you to become faster. So you go into the Rock and Roll 10K and you say, you know what, I'm going to take a lot of pictures. I'm going to do this or that. I'm going to socialize as I go along and high five people. And all of a sudden you look down at your watch and say, wow, that was a great time, whatever it is. And it sort of allows you that ability to understand that you don't always, with the things that we're talking about, it's not always an intensity that we're talking about. We're not always talking about just constantly being focused and having blinders on and this go, 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 go. It's an ability to allow yourself the freedom to do as well as you can do. And sometimes going into a race like, rock and roll, dress up in something. One of our athletes, Yoshi, dressed up as Elvis and just ran the races. I mean, how cool is that? That I think really expands the range that someone will have when you come to a race, that you can find that best tactic. How do you stay mentally focused for, a 12-hour day, a 13-hour, whatever it is, and not even focused again, where I'm saying blind or focused, but how do you enjoy that moment as you go along?
No, I think that that is so important. And once again, you just gotta have the idea before, right? Like, what are my goals here?
Yeah.
Right? Are my Because once again, like, let's say this is just a training race for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, I don't think you should kill it. Like, you shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
collapse at the finish of a training race,
Right.
because that's going to put you in a hole for training
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of the week. Pretty much every athlete I coach has a swim tomorrow. They get today
Mm-hmm.
off. They raced yesterday. They get today off, and then they're starting swimming tomorrow, and then they're going to ride on Wednesday, and we're back at it.
Yep.
If they would have went too hard, where they collapsed at the finish and we're all cramped up,
Yeah.
then once again, like, we turned a B race into an A race.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
And the other thing is, and I know we're talking about, like, this is an opportunity to go hard, but it also is within reason, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to dig a hole,
Mm-hmm.
in a training race.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to gain information and gain some
Yeah.
physiology, but you don't want to crush yourself. John, I want to talk about open water swimming
Yeah.
races, because this is one that I kind of had highlighted, and it's something that, for me, before my first Ironman, I was really nervous about doing the distance, like swimming the 2.4. So we used to have that race, the Slam the Dam race
Yep.
here, and I signed up for it. It was so great because it was like a month, I think, or
Yeah.
maybe 6 weeks before Ironman Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And man, did that ever help my anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
to actually, and I tried hard in it. Like, I didn't do well. I didn't win or by any means, but just to go do an open water race where there is some anxiety, I think that it's something like that we don't have a lot of opportunity to do in Nevada.
Right.
Um, but there are a ton of open water swim races in Southern California for people here, or throughout the country for other people. And I want to, I would encourage anyone that has some pre-race anxiety, especially around the swim, to go
Mm-hmm.
to one of those, because you can really lower the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
You're not thinking about, oh, what's my tire pressure? What's
Oh.
my nutrition going to be on the run? What shoes what's transition? It's just, you get in the water and you can just concentrate on the swim.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can gain a lot of confidence in that. Um, I mean, I think I've done, I don't know, maybe 10 open water swim races, and every one has been a good experience, even though, like we've talked about many times, swimming is not my jam. I don't really super
Right.
enjoy it, but I've enjoyed every one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is something that, like you're talking about, that people have not fully taken advantage of, is finding those open water swims, because you can really work on some of that pre-triathlon race anxiety by getting comfortable with just swimming in open water at a pace that you are really trying to push hard. And it does a few things. One, you don't have to worry, as you said, about getting out of the water and biking and running. And so you can really just say, this is what I'm going to do: 1.2 mile swim, 2.4 maybe even all the way up to a 10K. Those are common open water swim distances. And just, going to the start line and, remembering or learning what it's like to see how far out the buoy is. And you're like, oh, I got to swim all the way out there. And it always looks different at the shore as opposed to on the map or even standing up on, a ways away from the water, because often you're looking down on the water and it looks quite different when you're down on the edge of the water. And you're like, wow, that's a long ways. Well, getting that in your mindset of how far that is. And I do like to do course recon for a triathlon, trying to understand the distances that you have between buoys, the main turn buoys, just to have a mindset. Oh, that's going to be 200 meters. And then when I'm swimming in the pool, I actually try to translate to my swim. I'm like, okay, I've got 200 more meters left. Oh, that's this turn buoy. And now I know I'm going to be heading for the finish line at that point. But then doing that in open water, there's really some good advantage of, again, just learning what you're capable of doing.
Joe, can you actually speak maybe to the tactics as well? I mean, this is more of your thing is the swimming. Like, what tactics could you potentially take from open water swim races into triathlon?
Oh, no, totally. Well, one, sighting, ability, I guess that's more of a skill versus a tactic, but having, the idea of how often you're going to sight based upon what buoy you're going to or what you're going to be sighting, whether it's geographical something or trying to find a particular buoy. But the tactics of drafting off other swimmers, being able to practice getting on someone's feet or on their hip, or someone is on your feet or on your hip, and getting used to that sort of positioning of other people around you. I think that's great. And then the tactics of turning at buoys too, knowing, what angle to take, whether that is a tangent as you talk about for a swim or for a run, but maybe you end up saying, you know what, I'm going to take this wider purposefully because it's all congested here. There's a lot of swimmers, at that buoy. I'm going to go around them instead of trying to fight and get that shortest distance. And there's times to, tactically that's better to do than to run the risk of getting kicked or hit. No one's doing it maliciously, but it's just natural that you come up on each other and you sometimes slow down in the turn and everyone starts to go a little bit more vertical, and then they open up and they go horizontal again. And it's very, the probability of being kicked on a turn buoy is pretty high.
Yeah, and experiencing it, right? Experiencing
Yeah.
someone knocking your goggles off you.
Yeah.
You do, or your goggles fog up. Like, what do you do? How do you clear them?
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of reasons to do it, and I know you kind of already alluded to it, but also having a big group of people.
Yeah. Right.
Because often these swim races are mass start.
Hmm.
In triathlon now we're doing these time trial starts or
Yeah.
wave starts. In every swim race I've done, it's been okay. You're all going,
Yeah.
and that's something that just having that anxiety of having all these people around you
Hmm.
is it's good to go through that in a thing that maybe is not as important to you, like maybe the your A race triathlon.
Yeah.
I'll also let people know that because we get this or Marie's got this website that we look at. I can't remember what it was, but there's a website out there that actually shows every open water swim race in the United States.
Oh, cool.
And in the summer in Southern California, it's literally every weekend.
Yeah.
So if you're in somewhere and you're going to go down to California for the weekend, like look at it.
Yeah.
Arizona's got a really good circuit as well. I think they have like 10 different they go to different lakes in the summer.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of opportunity even around us that you can do that, and I would absolutely take advantage of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, I think it is important in the open water swim competitions that people look at what the rules are. And, sometimes there are rules where you cannot wear a wetsuit regardless of the water temperature. And then there's also different divisions for people who, at certain races, different divisions for people who do wear wetsuits and those who don't. And there's nothing wrong with doing the wetsuit, division if you want to practice swimming in your wetsuit. And it's sometimes there's a little bit of a a drama between the no wetsuit people and the wetsuit people and the swim competitions. But shrug that aside and say, look, this is something I'm trying to get better at, swimming in open water and swimming in open water in a wetsuit.
No, I totally agree, and you're right. There are some that they have the different division. I don't think I mean I know there's a few that you can never wear a wetsuit,
Yep,
even if
yeah, there are some, yeah.
the ones that they have that option. Once again, you're not there to win.
No, right, right.
If you're there to win, like don't wear a wetsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unless you want to
Mm-hmm.
win the wetsuit division,
Yeah.
which they often have. But the one that I've done several times is called Naples Island. It's down near Long Beach, and they
Mm-hmm.
have, basically there's a separate division for wetsuits, or you couldn't win or something. I'm
Yeah,
blank on.
yeah, right,
But I
right.
didn't care because I'm like
Yep.
I'm getting ready for a race in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a wetsuit swim. I want to practice in my wetsuit, and
Yeah,
that's
right.
fine. It's once again, it's why you're doing what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Mm-hmm.
I will add though, John, if you're going to do a bike race and they say no time trial bikes,
Yeah,
don't time trial
yeah,
bike.
yeah, there's very few bike races that allow the time trial unless it's yeah, something like Corporate Challenge, I think doesn't really care, but most of the time you do need to check the type of bike for a bike race.
So let's really quickly talk about bike racing.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I'll tell you is like I'm a proponent of it to a certain extent. I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely a proponent if you can get a time trial.
Yeah.
I'm also a proponent for a hill climb.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great hill climbs in California and in Arizona. We used to have a great one here. They don't have it anymore. I'm reluctant to have someone do a road race though.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger, if you are not used to riding in a Peloton and not used
Mm-hmm.
to racing, it can be it can be a little bit too, I think, too much risk versus the
Mm-hmm.
reward for a road race. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think time trials where you're starting off one at a time, Fiesta Island type of time trial, those are so much fun to do and are great training tool for triathlon because it really is mimicking what the bike segment should be like. It's not drafting, it's you against the road and against the clock, and those are a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing those. And like you said, doing some of the longer rides are great, uh, but doing something like a crit, or if you start having to register for a race and it says what class rider are you, probably not your ride. ABC, probably not your Cat 1, 2, 3. It's probably not the ride that's best for triathlon. Now, it's fun. It's a lot of fun to be in a bike race, and it's a neat dynamic, but it's a skill that you really need to learn, and really need to dedicate some time to riding in a pack. And I'm not meaning too wide. I'm meaning 4, 5, 6 people wide. Being
In the
able to
middle.
ride in a pack and being able to be confident in that, as well as having confidence in the others around you, is really important because you would start off at a low category rider, which makes sense, but then you're also in a category with other low category riders who may be just as inexperienced, and you can get into some pretty quick dangerous spots pretty quickly in those types of races.
Yeah. I've only done a few of the open races. The problem is with the categorizing system is you always start out in it's Cat 5,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like the newbie, but you as a triathlon often have way more power
Mm-hmm.
than
Yeah.
a Cat 5, right? Like you probably have Cat 3 power and you're a Cat 5.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be really frustrating too to be kind of like sitting there and like
Right.
in this group. And yeah, I'm just telling my experiences, and I would just go off of the front and everyone would draft
Yeah,
off.
yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially not only tactically for that category of rider, but also safety wise. If you're up front, you get a little bit more freedom to ride your ride. So
I went up front because I was so scared. I was like, oh my gosh, like this peloton of 6 wide is
yeah,
6 wide and 20 deep. I didn't want to be any part of that, so I just went
yeah.
to the front. And then
Oh,
of course, as soon as we get to like the first big climb, I got dropped because I was working hard, nobody else was.
right, right, right.
The other thing that's gonna happen during a bike race is there's gonna be a sprint at the end, and you're
Uh-huh.
gonna be crushed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a lot of these guys, that's all they do. They hang in the peloton and they just wait to crush you at the end.
Yeah,
So just so you
that's
know,
right.
that's going to happen.
Very strategic. Yeah.
Up a 1200-watt sprint probably, and they do, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that once again, I wish there was more time trials for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, man, it's so cool. I hear all these podcasts of people in England, in the UK, and
hmm
Wednesday night's time trial night,
Mm.
and all these towns have got time trials on
Yeah.
Wednesday night, and they just go like year round. Every Wednesday night's a time
Mm.
trial. That'd be so fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that here.
No, they are. It is fun to go and do just an all out 20K or all out 40K type of ride. How about tours? Where do you fit tours in with riding?
Like Tour of Summerland, like that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Those
Where-
I'm a big fan of, like the
mhm.
Century rides,
Yep.
because those aren't races.
Right.
Now, yes, there'll be 10 people off the front that'll treat it like a race,
hmm
but I'll often join those 10 people because it's not like they're not fighting at every corner to,
hmm
they're going hard. And I've done those Century rides where
Yeah.
people are going super hard. I love them. I think
Yeah.
they're, because once again, like you can get 100 miles in and it's supported, like every
hmm
25 miles. So there's an aid station, you can fill
Yep.
up on stuff,
hmm
um, and it can actually mimic, especially for an Ironman. Like
hmm
I'm coaching someone that's doing an Ironman. I tell them like, hey, like let's start looking for a Century ride about 4 weeks out,
Yeah. Right.
and you can. And oftentimes on these Century rides, you can ride a time trial bike. They don't care,
Yeah, that's right.
and so you can get on your time trial bike. You can get
hmm
everything dialed in, get whatever
hmm
you want to get your
Yep.
nutrition. Shoot, have them, and I've actually done this too, and then have them do like a 5K run after
hmm
Century, and then get off and just get your shoes on and treat it like, people are gonna think you're crazy. I mean, I've done it where I've
Yeah.
done a Century ride and
Right.
I got my shoes in the car and I'm
Yeah.
switching, changing. Next thing
Love
you know,
it.
you're running, people are looking at you like, what are you doing? Like, it's perfect though, because the
Uh,
intensity is very similar.
yeah.
Can be very similar to doing an Ironman. So yeah, I'm
hmm
a big fan of those. The only thing I'm not a fan of is they can be really expensive,
Yeah. 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 They can be.
several $100s.
hmm
Yeah.
Well,
So
I love them as well. In fact, uh, Death Ride. Where is it? Where that one? Was one of
I
my
was
favorite
looking at the
tours.
Death Ride this year, John.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you did that.
Oh, that was, and sometimes these tours are like that. There's some type of epic ride, and it's not necessarily a race, but it does, it goes back to expanding what your abilities are. To be able to do all the passes on that ride, and I think it was 29 miles, and just to do that was really a neat accomplishment. So it had nothing to do with time. I have no idea actually what my time was, but again, expanding what your capabilities are, and is really, really sort of a neat training tool.
Well, I think it's a good way too, because you can pretty much set your Ironman pace, right? Like,
Hmm
you're like, okay, like I'm gonna do 180 watts for 5 hours. Let's say
Yeah,
that's,
yeah, yeah.
and you could do it, and you get to the end, and you're like, oh man, that's too much. I can't run a marathon off of this.
Right, right.
Once again, in a training ride, sometimes it's hard to do.
Yep.
But when you get in a group of people and everyone's kind of pushing, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I've probably done a dozen of these Century rides like this, and
hmm
always by like mile 80, I'm like, oh man, I went too
mm
hard.
Yeah, yeah,
Such a good learning lesson for what you
yeah.
could actually do. And remember, you didn't even swim before, like an
No,
hour.
right.
Hour. So no, I'm a big fan of those.
Well, I love it. This is fun. Individual races preparing for triathlon. I love it.
This is good. Well, John, hey, thanks. We'll probably see you all again on Friday. So
Yeah.
we'll go back to back here. Um, for those that are following along, we're always looking for new topics and new things. So if you have questions, you can throw them in the Facebook page, Las Vegas Triathlon Facebook page, and we'll see if we can answer some of your questions. John, our number one episode, I think, is the Ask Us.
I know. I was just going to say that we need to do another one of those where we get a lot of input. So
Maybe let's do this. We'll we won't do this next one, but the one after that will be an Ask Us Anything part two. And
I love it.
do that. Awesome. All right, John. Well, hey, have a good week.
Yeah.
And thanks for arranging this on a Monday. This was great.
Awesome. All right. Talk soon.